Welcome to 30 Minutes of Wisdom, Rising in Consciousness and Mindfulness. I'm Veronica Carrera, the creator and producer of the show. 30 Minutes of Wisdom is about rising in consciousness and connecting to our authentic self. To help us persevere through these uncertain times, we have created a space for conversations that are rooted in wisdom and higher consciousness. And today's topic, I'm going to admit, is a topic that I'm not necessarily the most comfortable with. We are going to be talking about reopening and re-evolving. How do we process what's happened in the last couple of years with COVID? How do we shift? What does that mean? So for that, let me introduce you to a couple of my wonderful friends and amazing human beings who are going to help me have this difficult discussion. So let's see what comes out of it. First, let me introduce Lynn Min. Lynn, it's good to have you.
It's always good to be here.
Yes. So then we have Daniela Matos.
Hi. It's always a pleasure.
Okay, good. So let's have this conversation, and if anyone in the audience has a question, I'll go in and I'll make sure that I'll ask the question live, so that we can process this together. All right. So the topic again is reopening and re-evolving. So what do we mean by reopening and re-evolving? And what is the irony behind it?
Okay, so I do have a question, and I'm going to just kind of throw this on Veronica.
Oh no!
Before we put meaning and all of that, I want to know why this. Just in your own words, if you can explain and share how you're processing. Why is this such an anxious topic for you?
Lynn, thank you for the question. I'll get you after the show. So the reason why this is a difficult topic is because I don't think I have had enough time to process. I feel that all I have been doing this last year and a half is just surviving and making sure that my family's okay, that I'm okay, and work. All I've been doing is working, and it's a way to just keep everything moving forward, but I haven't paused. And this is the first time. It's kind of brave to have this conversation live and process this together. But I feel safe with both of you ladies, because you as a psychotherapist and also Daniela, you who teaches wisdom and yoga and meditation, I think you are the perfect people to have this conversation. But thank you for asking, Lynn. So why don't we go back then? Why don't we go back to then? What do we mean by reopening and revolving? What comes to you? Why do we title it this way?
Yeah. So let me just share. Thank you so much for answering. I know it was a hard question and I just threw it on you, but I just thought, lead with, an example of, like, you see how I'm doing it? You see how I'm like clunky? It's okay, right? We don't know. We don't have the answers, right? We're not here to give answers, but reopening and re-evolving, it's so ironic because like we've never done this before. Suggests that like we're doing it again. Like, when did we ever get over a pandemic and have like a 15, 16 month break? And when did we go back from it? Right. With so much to process and like, it's like coming at us in real time. And, I just wanted to ask with that question to you, Veronica, because I think what's behind that is there's so much charge, and the anxiety comes from the unknown. Like, we haven't had space or time just collectively as people, or just even individuals, to stop and be like, what did this mean for us? What is a narrative that's being created? And so we're just a ball of like emotions, right? Like, there's the stimulus, like it happened, and now we have all these feelings, but we haven't really like understood it. And so I think also behind the anxiety is, what is the right way to respond? Right? What's the right, like, what is acceptable? What is respectful? What is my responsibility? And there's no certainty around any of this. And so this show, when you said, in an uncertain time, we're going to create a space to really talk about this and be honest about what's making us uncertain and what's making us so scared to even speak through this, but like, just to create a space. And I think that's really what the irony is, it's like we're opening for the first time, and it's not like we haven't been evolving. We're evolving every moment, but we're re-evolving. And I just wanted the title, right, to just kind of remind us that this is new, guys. This moment in time collectively for us is new. And so, yeah.
And I think, Lee, you just touched on something that I had in my mind from the beginning, which is we all stayed in our cocoon, right? And now we build this anxiety. And most people want to go back to what it was.
Mm-hmm.
So that's attachment to what it was. But time just goes forward. So instead of thinking of reopening, I would think of rebuilding of something new, based with everything we have learned so far, including, oh my God, all I did was take care of my family and work, and I didn't have time to stop. Why didn't you have time to stop? I felt like this pandemic was actually an invitation to the global population to stop. You know, that's what I thought. In fact, when they start saying quarantine, which comes from the word in Latin of 40.
What is it, Daniela?
So quarantine comes from 40, the number 40, right? 40. In Kundalini Yoga is a magical number, in fact. In Kundalini Yoga, we say that it's needed 40 days in order to dissolve the mental barriers that we have that do not allow us to expand our consciousness. 40 days is what you need to practice one single meditation, the same one, you repeat it for 40 days. And once you've done that, you dissolve all those barriers that keep you in this little shell of, you know, don't let your awareness to expand, you know. And once that dissolves, whatever you pick up after that, it's easier to expand. So we always say, do it for 40 days and then see how you feel and continue, you know, because then is when you're going to really see the beauty, the transformation.
That's really interesting. 40 is also a really biblical number too, right? 40 years in the desert. There's something about
40 days, Moses too. So it is a powerful number, and it can. And we all talk so long, especially in the beginning, about quarantine. So for me, as soon as I heard that term, I said, "Oh my God, the universe is telling people to stop." You know, but and I'm not blaming people or anything, because I know how hard it is to disconnect. You know, I know how hard it took me, a paralyzing pain, in a birth of a second child, and my first child being sick, for me to stop. So I know how hard it actually is to stop and think and feel, you know. But I know everybody's anxious because everybody stayed in their cocoon and kept running, perhaps even faster than before, right? Because time just goes by. It's different when you are alone and you don't have your colleagues to have those quick break to relieve your mind. You know, not everybody picked up a practice like meditation because it's not for everybody. So some people are still searching for what brings them to balance, you know. But I think the key here is that we are going to a new future. Is the unknown that Lynn talked about. And humans are naturally afraid of the unknown, you know, and brings that fear. So I think the key word is unknown, and it's the fear we have of the unknown.
So I just
Daniela, thank you for reminding me of that. And if I may say, maybe I should redeem myself a little bit, because I actually...
we were giggling like, oh, we got called out.
So I actually did start my meditation practice more purposefully during the pandemic. I remember Lynn and Daniela, I think you joined too. We started on every Tuesday.
Yes,
we did. We started every Tuesday getting together, friends from all over the United States and even Latin America or Europe, joining our calls on Tuesdays to get together and process.
Which was this?
Which
the
was
reason why this was created.
Yes.
The beginning of 30 minutes of wisdom. Wow, you guys are helping me process it. And it was actually to process this in a spiritual way, right? Now, and I feel so blessed because of that time with all of you. But now that led to these moments of wanting to go live, to wanting to serve, be of service to the collective. And how do we take this wisdom and share it, or all of us to process this together? Now, with that said, this leads me to the next question. Can we talk about the trauma of the COVID experience and the trauma of the reopening experience?
So Daniela, when you talk about like changes and like newness, anything that like stops our brain from just like adjusting, right? Any newness is very inconvenient for our survival brain because it has to like see if it's like it's safe enough, like it has to try different things. It's a lot of energy on anything new. And so I feel like there's this natural way that we have, like when the pandemic hit, we didn't know how long it was going to be. I think everyone thought it was going to be like 3, 4, 5 months, maybe 6 months.
Yeah.
It ended up being what, like 16 months now, 15, 16 months now.
Yeah.
And now that we have created new norms about it, go back out, and now again. And so I think when you talked about new norms, I thought, wow, this is also a moment, a consistent, like a discipline of letting go of the old. And that is so traumatic that there's a lot of grief, there's a lot of loss in letting go, right? So that you can have that space and the energy to create the new. And it's requiring this of us on a global scale and in a collective scale. And so I think, people have lost loved ones. I mean, you guys all know, right? You're more in the corporate world, Veronica. And so, like jobs have changed. I'm just trying to think through like all of my clients who brought me stories of like traumas that they've been like had to go through with COVID. Just not just only, but also the fear, the consistent fear of like something out there that I might not know how, like it's invisible, it's out there and it might get me, but not only just me, I might bring it home and it might like really affect my family. That's scary.
Yeah.
Right. So just to acknowledge that our brains were in this like place of primitive, like fear, hypervigilance.
Yeah,
right?
and for a very long time, and Lynn, you probably know that too. So when you are in this fight or flight, because this will be a fight or flight situation, okay, that's what your brain gauges on, right? So the sympathetic nervous system is on overdrive. When that happens, the blood goes to the muscles because it thinks you might need to run from a tiger, and the blood goes to the middle of the reptilian brain. It feeds that part of the brain that will assist on that response. So imagine we are supposed to be having a balance between the calming, relaxed part of the nervous system, the parasympathetic, and the sympathetic nervous system, right? And they are supposed to work in some sort of balance. Even before the pandemic, most people were already in overdrive of the fight and flight because the emails from the boss or from the client already became the tiger. Right? So we already knew that. The pandemic just increased that 10, 20, 100 folds, I don't know, depending on the person. So what we have now is people in constant fear, in constant anxiety. So one thing that I think everybody will have to eventually figure out is how do I break that cycle? How do I bring myself to balance? In my case, is my Kundalini yoga practice, because I practice and that brings my system in balance. But for everybody, it's different, but we have to have that, because otherwise, that's what excess stress and fear causes in the long term. And then it's really hard once you're stuck with only one of your nervous system driving the show, which is in our case, the fight and flight, right? Because of everything that happened. It's a challenge, but I think as things start open up, perhaps, and I know how everybody's busy, I have been there, I am very busy as well. I think in order for your own well-being, it is almost like your own duty in some ways to find out how to turn the other system on, how to relax and look for ways, explore. Really, it might be just walk in the park, taking a bath, listening to some calming music in your, laying down, because the system has been in overrun for too long.
Yes, and I think we had a conversation earlier as we prepared for the show that I guess a good comparison would be that children, when they experience trauma, they don't have the capacity to process trauma, right? So that's why when they become an adult, they have to do the hard work of healing.
Yes.
So if we can pause there for a moment, we have been like children in a way, but and going through this unprecedented time collectively, globally. And how do we process this? Perhaps some other people are a little bit more ahead than others, but we're all going through this together. But now that we used for a long time that part of a brain that help us stay alive, how do we then shift that to that part of that brain that helps us make meaning out of this experience, so that we can transition and turn the corner in the most healthy or the healthiest way? Any additional thoughts in regards to this?
Yeah. So I'm thinking Daniele, when you were talking about like just the nervous system and stuff, I think when there's a term for this, the amygdala hijack, right? It like hijacks.
Yeah. That's
and what we're trying to get to is a sustainable place, because our body gets into the hypervigilant mode, but it's not supposed to stay there, right? We literally use a different part of a brain to connect, to be creative, to relax, right? And so how do we get there? I'm thinking of Deb Dana's work. Deb Dana, I don't know how to, but she did this beautiful work on polyvagal theory on how to get from one space to another, where you can start relaxing, you can start being creative, and you can start connecting with each other. You can be social. Why? Because that makes you more resilient. That makes you process more, like oncoming stressors real time better. That makes your sleep regulated, and the regulations of stress actually improve. And so it's not this like, okay, so that's what's going on, and we're constantly bombarded by it. When you're 5, you're scared of the shot, and you're like, and you have a meltdown because you have 5-year-old defense mechanisms. And then when we grow up, I think we do this thing of like, no more shots. And then we're like, you know what? We have to do this. We have to go in and get our shots. But for some reason, we're able to go in and not have a meltdown, even though we still don't like the shot, even though the shot is just as painful as it was, because we have grown, we have expanded, and we know how to understand this in a very different narrative. So there's a little bit of reframing. But Deb Dana says you have to go get there to that other space through play. Playing is one thing that helps people transition to that other brain space. And so so we see how like self-care is like, with the cucumbers in the bath, this is self-care, but sometimes I'm like, my mani-pedi like ends up on my calendar, and I'm like, I'm late for my mani-pedi, and I'm like rushing, and it's like, it defeats the purpose. Right. And so I start to ask myself, how are the ways in my life, in my relationships, and with my body, how are the ways that I play? Dance is one of them. You know what I mean? How are the ways that I still pretend? Like I fantasize about vacations, if I'm playing doll, like how are the ways that I do that? I go to Home Goods and I pick up some new, decor. So these are all play areas for me that I have like learned to really embrace and kind of name for myself. But that's one way. Yeah.
Right. In the end of the day, I think is to find things to do, to practice that are not related in the case, I think, to work, because the work can keep that same level of stress on, right? But the things that bring joy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you're so right.
And bring joy, because the vibration of joy is high, and it's going to overcome the vibration of fear.
Yes.
of worry.
I love that.
So, again, there are multiple ways of achieving that level of, of relaxing. And I think the time now is during this time, it's important to find out what they are, because you're going to be using, and, in the future, you're going to need them, because you also don't want, the winter season comes and you're like, oh my God, here they go. You know what I mean? Like literally like a PTSD type of response every time something comes on TV. We want to also avoid that. So I think, again, it's an invitation to go within, to find out what is it that is your play, what is it that brings you joy, because that will make your vibration to rise, and everything is energy in the end of the day. So
everything is energy. You said it, and I do want to bring something that in Buddhism, right? Attachment leads to suffering, right? And then letting go and being this spirit of being free brings joy, right? So it's how do we transition from suffering to joy? Is detach, let go, and basically just step into the unknown and
That
know
is
that
scary. Yeah.
it's okay, and it's scary. Listen, for me, I'll tell you what was hard is that I am Latin. I'm used to seeing people and hugging them and giving them a kiss. And I know, Daniela, you're from Brazil, and you
Same
know how
thing.
we are. Yeah, exactly. And for me to just see someone, which I want this to lead to the next part of the discussion, to see someone not know how to be. And I love to be connected to people. I love to feel connected and to feel that my initial response has to be that I have to separate, create distance for the sake of these other human beings' well-being, right? And that has been hard for me, and accepting the new normal and what is supposed to be, and being okay that I may not have all the answers. But maybe this leads me to ask you the question, like, what is the best way to be in this new normal?
So, as you were saying that, I just, what visually popped up in my mind was, now when I meet a friend, it's like, hey, like, I don't know, right? And it's super like uncomfortable, because my heart is, I want to make you feel comfortable. I don't want to be like, oh, are you vaccinated? I don't want them to feel uncomfortable. And like, I'm so happy to see them, but there's just like so many different layers of that now. Like, I'm not sure if you need me to tell you I'm vaccinated or not. I don't know where you are regarding that. Like, I don't know if you feel like it's a threat, it's not a threat. Can I touch you? Can I hug you? Is a fist pump okay? Or I don't know if asking you for a hug will make you feel uncomfortable. So there's like this like feedback loop that's like so charged, and like you know what I mean? I think it's really awkward and like just new and like overwhelming.
It's not the human nature. That's the end of it. That's the simple explanation. It's not the human nature.
Yeah.
It's tricky.
Yeah. But I think naming and claiming it might be the first step. Like, what are these anxieties that we don't talk about, right? Like, I can definitely say, like, for me, like, this whole question of vaccine is so sensitive to people. Sometimes I feel like I'm trying to gauge, like, do you feel like if I were vaccinated, I'm wronging you, or like I'm not in your way of thought? Or if I am vaccinated, oh, you're one of those, you drank the Kool-Aid or something like that. Like, I'm always trying to gauge that. And that makes me feel really like, ooh, like, I don't like this, So I'm just going to name that and claim that. And
I think it's important, Lynn, and this to think about this that with curiosity and compassion.
Yeah.
And non-judgment.
Non-judgment, exactly, which is a Buddhist principle, or you would call it a Christian principle, any type of faith, the non-judgment. But as human beings, as part of the human race, how do we do this with kindness, compassion, and curiosity? Perhaps if someone is not vaccinated, why are, perhaps when is the right space, the right time? Why do you, are you not vaccinated? What do you feel? Then that's your choice. But do it from a place of wanting to understand.
Yes.
And the same thing for these people who are vaccinated. They're vaccinated because they probably feel they have to protect themselves and their families and the well-being of humanity. So how do we stay in a place of understanding,
of love,
of love?
Because I think this is all going to come down to the vibration of love, right? And so if the way I see it is, if you carry yourself that vibration, so in my opinion, I would try to be in that space myself for my own sake, so I can, the way I look at it is like, if I'm not well, mentally, emotional, physically, I can provide for my children. That's what I learned in my journey, right? Because when I was very sick, when I was almost I couldn't move, I couldn't be with my children, right? So I always come like, what makes me feel whole? How am I feeling, well and whole and all this? And in the end of the day, it's just loving myself and having self-acceptance, self-love. Then if you go to the other person as you are going to meet somebody, but you have that same eye that you have towards yourself to the other, right? Because you don't know the fear of the person. You don't know what they have gone through during this pandemic. Did they lose someone close? Did they not lose someone close? Right? We don't know the other person's story and background and experiences, and even talking for even go beyond this. Look, in the 2017, and I'm going to be very quick, 2017, some Spanish researchers, and I put this in my book, find out that a trauma, that some type of worms, they were testing trauma, okay, on worms. They were giving shocks to worms, would pass 10 generations, 10 or 14 generations of worms. So who knows what imprint do we carry? Because in the spiritual world, we talk about this, but even this is in the scientific world, this university in Barcelona is even working on that. But that trigger, we don't know the other person. So I think the way to go is just go very loving. But in order for you to give love to other people, you have to find love towards yourself so you can give. So I think in the way I would approach, I would work self-love, self-acceptance of where I am, what my decisions I took, so I can expand that to others and be non-judgmental, compassionate, and loving towards everybody, because I think that's what's going to require, because not everybody's going to have the same background, the same experiences. Right. And who am I to judge?
That's right, Daniela. And I think as we wrap up, because I started this conversation feeling a little bit anxious about talking about COVID and reopening and how are we supposed to be in this new normal. Now, after we have had this 30 minutes of conversation, I feel that this is the beginning. It's okay to be open. It's okay to speak from the heart. And it's okay for us to process this together. And one really positive thing about the pandemic and the crisis that we have been going through is that he has made it permissible for us to talk about mental health, right? So that is a topic that is very, very important. And corporations and everyone, we should be really focusing on now for the well-being of everyone. And maybe, Lynn, I'll have you finish by saying that you are going to start a segment of 30 minutes of wisdom once a month talking about mental health. I'll have you finish with some final thoughts. And also, if you have any final thoughts, Daniela, please feel free to share so we can close the segment.
So starting tomorrow at 10, and yes, it's a Saturday, but we decided Saturday because, we're going to give one Friday to a rest day, like a Sabbath Friday, and we're going to do it on a Saturday instead. I'm partnering with Dr. Jeff McNeary, who's had 20 years of just severe, like dealing with severe trauma and the imprinted ways that it comes out generationally and the other levels of psyche and consciousness. I mean, he's had so much like just experience, and we're going to try to merge it with spirituality. Things that like where psychology leaves off and does not have words for, we're going to try to put some deeper words and understanding and provide a container where we can start to understand mental health in a more holistic way. So the first of those episodes is going to start tomorrow. So I'm really excited for that. And I think my final thoughts is just, you know, how do we start to create a therapeutic presence first and foremost to ourselves, as our thoughts of like, oh, I have to, you know, whatever thoughts it is, feel it, think the thoughts, feel the feelings, know that you're not your feelings or your thoughts, and don't judge them, right? Be kind and observant and warm and inviting and even curious. I wonder why I feel that way. I wonder why I think that. What's my background? And when you start to practice that, you start to ooze that out to others. And so when they're like, when you encounter something that you don't understand, you lead with kindness that you've experienced with yourself. Right. And so I think that's my final thought, like just remembering again, yeah, let's be that therapeutic presence to one another and to ourselves.
Beautiful, Lynn.
Yeah, and I would just say be kind to yourself so you can be kinder to others. Mm-hmm. And remember, it's something new, not only to you, but to everybody. So we have this tendency of thinking that our problems is just ours and we are the only ones in this mess. And no, the same problem that affects you affects millions of people. So be kind to yourself so you can be kind to others.
Yeah, and just some final thoughts from me. If there's anything that this pandemic has taught us is that we are more connected than what we thought we were. And we're connected in so many ways. And as part of the human race family, you know, let's do this together. Let's do this together with love, with compassion, and curiosity, understanding. And thank you again. And join us tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern Time for our first segment on mental health in the corporate world. Thank you so much, Daniela. It's so good to see you here. And thank you for being in the show. And thank you, Lynn. Always wonderful to have you. Have a wonderful weekend.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.